Has the time come to retire the 5800X? For this investigation, I'm going to run a few newer games in my library in 1080p with medium presets. And I did pick the games that I thought are CPU limited. Before we go to the games, let's check the CPU Z, as there is an interesting misconfiguration in my system. The system was originally built with a 3600 and the 5800X was a later drop-in upgrade. The early AIM4 motherboard, however, had an unexpected limitation. Even the CPU-Z here reports wrong information. The B450 based motherboards are limited to PCIe 3, so even if the CPU and the GPU support PCIe 4, the system is still locked to PCIe 3. The B450 based motherboard has been a wrong pick from the beginning, but the box did have a 5000 series compatible sticker on it. If we jump to the GPU-C, we can see that the bus interface is reported as PCIe 16 x 4.0 at 16 x 3.0. It has been generally reported that the bus speed has little impact on GPU performance, but keep in mind that this test is not the absolute best the 5800 can bring.
Guys! We've got company! Anyone expecting a silver freak?
Drop it, scum!
On to the games then. I haven't played this game for a while, so I'm a little rusty. Don't be too hard on me. I wanted something running on the Unreal Engine 5, so RoboCop felt like a good pick. Here we can see the load well on the GPU side, and the 1% lows remain well above the 60 FPS mark. Now I'm not sure if this simple hallway is the most demanding scene, but having completed the game, I can say it runs plenty fine. It has also been patched to support FSR frame generation, so nothing much to report here but smooth gameplay. I also had Hellblade 2 Senua's Saga footage, but even as it seems a more simple game, it had higher CPU usage. Unfortunately, it seems to have some internal limitation, causing its frame rate to bounce on an invisible ceiling, and the frame time graph was very uneven. I tried to double check all the settings, but I couldn't find a reason for its behavior, and I decided to ditch the footage. Moving on to Warhammer 40k Space Marine 2. We already know this is a CPU-intensive title, as it has since become a favorite CPU benchmark for many reviewers. Here we can see the 1% lows hovering right at the 60 FPS mark, which is not great. The game runs acceptably, but there is no room to spare nor reserve for the future. There is also stutter every now and then, as expected for CPU bottlenecks. Interestingly, the CPU utilization hovers around 60%, which is not very high for CPU bottlenecks. And the game is perfectly threaded too, as all the threads spread out evenly on all cores. This suggests that the bottleneck could be bandwidth related, either the system RAM bandwidth or the PCIe bus bandwidth. Finally, we have the Star Wars Outlaws. I've been playing this game at 4K and the frame rate has been more 50ish than in the 60s, and that has been boosted to 100 plus with frame gen. I always thought I was GPU limited here, but testing out the 4080 has opened my eyes to the fact that this is the most CPU intensive game in my library. CPU utilization hovers near 80%, which means that some threads may be hitting even higher numbers, and certainly all of them are competing for resources like cache access and memory bandwidth. The CPU is running hot too, reaching 80 degrees Celsius at the end of my 15-minute test run. It's got a generic tower cooler, so the thermals could be better, but still, this is the most busy and hot CPU workload in any game I own. The 1% lows are down to 50 at times, which is not good at all, although most of the time we are at the 60 FPS mark. The game is well threaded, but some threads are more busy than others. There is nothing unusual about this game, like the Space Marine swarm system, that would obviously warrant this kind of CPU demand. This could be ray tracing related, as it is known to be also CPU intensive. Before we talk about the conclusion, there is one important factor to talk about. All of my testing was conducted on my 7900 XTX, which is shown to run faster on older CPUs than comparable Nvidia hardware. The situation is likely worse for Nvidia owners. So, then, what is the verdict? I did complete these games and many others in 2024, and it was all just fine. Stutters were rare occurrence, and the frame rates were always better than the 60 FPS mark. However, few games do take the 5800X right to the edge, just barely passing the 60 FPS mark, which leaves us with very little overhead for the future. 2025 might see the 5800X decline even further, but on the other hand, the current console generation might be the limiting factor for game development and ensure a passable experience on the 5800X until the next gen consoles arrive. What do you think? When will you be upgrading your CPU? Comment below.